Before we get too much farther into this course, we need to talk about errors, because you are going to make errors and you are going to make a lot of them. All beginning programming students do. Even experienced programmers make errors. Their errors are just a little less often and a little more complicated. So, how do you find errors and how do you correct them? Luckily, most of the time when you make an error, the compiler will find it for you, at least the ones that involve the syntax of the programming language. As an aside, I should say that there's really two types of errors in a program. Syntax errors, which are caused when you leave out an operator or a semicolon or misspell a word, and logical errors, which happen when your program doesn't do what you told it to do. Logical errors are harder to find because the compiler really doesn't know what you intend to do. Syntax errors are usually found by the compiler, and we're going to cover those right now. The first error that most beginning programming students make is leaving out semicolons from a statement. So let's look at the hello world example and the cout hello world statement, and let's take the semicolon off. Now let's build and run the program. Notice that there is a red square on line 7 which indicates an error. Now we're going to scroll down or look down to the logs below, and there you'll see an error message. And it says in function int main error expected semicolon before return. And then it also mentions that it's on line 7. This is telling us that the compiler was expecting a semicolon before it got to the word return, but it didn't find one. Now, we actually left the semicolon off of line 6, but the compiler found the error in line 7. The way most compilers work, the error message will show based on the line where the compiler finally gave up and said something was wrong. However, we do have a pretty good idea of what's wrong because it says expected semicolon. So we can go back and put the semicolon in place, build and run again, and everything works just fine. The second type of error you can make in a program is misspelling a reserved word. So for example, on the word return, if we accidentally type it wrong, R-E-T-R-N instead of R-E-T-U-R-N, and then build and run the program, we see an error message down below that says, in function int main error R-E-T-R-N was not declared in this scope. Now that doesn't exactly just say the word return was misspelled, but it's indicating to us that the compiler doesn't recognize the word R-E-T-R-N. From that error message, we can know to look back up in our code. We see that there's a red block by line 7. We can look at line 7 and see that the word return was misspelled. Put the U back in, build and compile, and the program works just fine. Another type of error occurs when you misspell an identifier. The identifiers in this program could be main or cout. So let's say we accidentally misspell cout cut and then decide to run the program or build and run the program. The error message is pretty much the same. It says in function int main error cut was not declared in this scope. So again, we can see the word that's highlighted, check it out, and realize that, oh yes, we spelled cout wrong. We left out the O. We add it back in, and if we compile and run the program, it'll work just fine. A final type of error that we'll cover right now is leaving out an operator. So for example, when you're hurrying through a program, you might type cout hello world without including the put to operator. It's a common mistake that I've seen many times in beginning programming students. When we build and run the program now, the error message is a little less clear. It says in function int main error expected semicolon before string constant. Well, again, we can use the red block to kind of figure out where the error is. We see that it says expected semicolon before string constant. Hello world is our string constant. So what it's saying is it's saying that the compiler can't find what to do with the string constant because it was looking for a semicolon or something else before that. Just because you know that cout is always followed by the put to operator, you'll realize that the put to operator should be used here. So you add that in, build and run the program again, and it works just fine. These are 4 examples of common errors that occur. Many other types of errors can happen in your programs, and as you go through, you'll just learn that you have to try to figure out what the compiler is trying to tell you is wrong, and then diagnose the error from that. When we get to situations that tend to lead to errors, I'll point them out to you so that you'll be aware of them for the future.